I know what trending is better than anybody in the world. I've been trending my whole life. From the day I was born, I've been trending.
I like the good publicity and I like the bad publicity. It all plays.
Who is Donald Trump? A while back I realized that for all the attention Trump gets, I actually didn't know much about his life, how he rose to become one of the most powerful people on the planet, and what his life and career can teach us about what he really wants. I didn't know any of that. So I delved in to try to better understand how he rose to power, and most importantly, why there are so many products with his name and face on them.
It is not a toupee, okay?
Okay?
All right.
Will you please inform the public?
So join me as we explore the rise of Donald Trump.
Rich, ruthless, and famous, known for the buildings he's built and the wives he's divorced.
He played Monopoly, but more than Monopoly, he played with building blocks. Always with building blocks.
Donald Trump was born in Queens, New York, a river away from the gleaming skyline of Manhattan. He was a middle child of 5 kids, the son of an immigrant mother from Scotland who ran the Trump home and who was known for her charitable work in the community. But in Trump's telling, his father was his greatest influence.
My father built low and moderate income housing in Brooklyn and Queens.
His dad made a big fortune taking advantage of post-World War II government programs that funded affordable housing complexes during New York's rapid growth. By all accounts, Fred Trump was an obsessively hard worker, saying that he was successful because he could, quote, squeeze 9 days of work into a 7-day work week. Growing up, young Donald was the rich kid on the block. But even still, his hardworking father forced him to have a newspaper delivery route to teach him hard work. Though apparently when it rained, his dad would drive him around on his newspaper route in his Cadillac. Okay. Fred Trump focused on teaching his son the ways of the real estate business, taking young Donald to construction sites from a very young age. He instilled in his son a deep drive to win at anything you do, to be the winner. He would tell Donald that he was raising him to be a king, and that he must become a killer at anything he did. He was tough on Donald because he wanted him to be a winner. At school, Donald Trump was, in his own words, aggressive. His music teacher, who died in 2015, once said that, quote, there are certain children who need attention all of the time. He was one of those. And even punching that music teacher in the face, apparently giving him a black eye, because, quote, I didn't think he knew anything about music. I mean, he was like in elementary school. But it does show you some of this personality that starts to shape up from a young age. Trump says in his book that he focused on creating mischief because for some reason, quote, I liked to stir things up. I liked to test people. It wasn't malicious, it was just aggressive. You can read a lot more about this in his book, The Art of the Deal, where he talks a little bit about his childhood, as well as this really well-reported biography, Trump Revealed. I pulled a lot from these sources in my reporting here. Anyway.
One of the great choices I ever made in terms of success was the choice of going to NYMA, New York Military Academy.
Trump's father, Fred, obsessed with hard work and discipline, sent Donald to military boarding school to live full-time when he was just 13 years old. And this is where Donald Trump really starts to thrive.
It was a good education. It was a good training. It was a good training. I enjoyed it.
From my reading, this military academy was pretty intense. It was a place where, quote, physical brutality and verbal abuse were tolerated and encouraged, both in hazing new students and physical disciplining from teachers. Trump actually thrived on this kind of intense structure. It helped fire up his competitive nature, and soon he would be getting good grades and winning medals for things like having the cleanest room, or the shiniest shoes, or the best made bed, all while going around telling fellow students that, quote, I'm going to be famous someday. And this is where I want to start to make a list of some of Donald Trump's core beliefs that start to become clear from a young age. This is stuff we'll see over and over again, and I want to make a list. First and foremost, the guy is obsessed with winning. You see this all over his childhood and the rest of his life.
I was a great baseball player.
What position?
First base, catcher, first base.
Trump was super into baseball. His baseball coach recounts that, quote, Donald always had to be number one in everything. He would do anything to win, and he wanted people to know that he was first. So teenage Donald Trump spends the school year thriving at military academy, eventually rising to the rank of captain over the rest of the cadets, and then spending summers back in Queens working with his dad, learning the ways of the real estate business. Both of these experiences are very formative and lay the foundation of who he will become and what he will do in his future. That future continues when he goes off to college.
I went to an Ivy League school. I'm very highly educated. I know words. I have the best words.
Trump gets into college, and he still doesn't know exactly what direction he's going to take. He considers going to film school in LA to become a filmmaker.
My other fantasy as I got older was to do movies. I wanted to be a movie maker.
Man, what an alternative world that would be. Donald Trump, the movie director.
Down the hall and to the left.
Thanks.
I like keeping a low profile.
If only. But ultimately, he decided to follow his father's path. He studies economics and business, and this is like during the 70s. There's a war going on in Vietnam. Young men are being recruited, but Trump qualifies for an educational deferment, meaning he gets out of the draft 4 times because he's going to college. Once he got out of school, he would have been eligible for the draft, but he qualified once again for a deferral because of a problem with his heel bone. Though there is some controversy around this, because the doctors who wrote Trump's deferral recommendation both lived and or worked in buildings owned by Fred Trump, Donald Trump's dad. And there's some speculation as to whether or not he actually did have a heel spur, or whether or not these doctors were doing Donald Trump's dad a favor by making it so his son wouldn't be sent off to war. Either way, he didn't go to war, and instead starts working for his dad's thriving real estate business, building lower and middle income apartment buildings in Brooklyn and Queens. And then there's this moment in 1964 that shows us another important part of his personality. We'll make it the second item on our list here. There was this huge bridge in New York that had just been completed. It was a massive feat of engineering, connected Brooklyn to like Staten Island or something. Fred Trump was invited to the opening ceremony of this bridge, and he invited his son Donald to be present. Donald sat there in the crowd and noticed that during this celebration of the bridge, the guy who actually designed the bridge was there, but he was just off in the corner. Quote, "No one even mentioned his name," recalls Donald. He goes on to say, quote, "I realized then and there that if you let people treat you how they want, you'll be made a fool. I don't want to be made anybody's sucker."
They just took us for a bunch of suckers.
This is a huge one. That for Donald Trump, it's not just about winning. It's that you must fight for recognition. That if you're not the center of the show, you're a sucker. Recognition and attention matter a great deal to Trump from a very young age.
I'm an artist. In a certain sense, I'm an artist. I build the greatest buildings in the world.
Okay, so Trump joins his dad's business and he starts really learning the ways.
And I started off making little deals in Brooklyn and Queens with my father, and they seemed to work out.
He's only in his 20s, but he quickly runs into some big issues that would redirect the course of his life. At this point, we're in like the 1970s. The Civil Rights Act had just passed, which made it illegal to discriminate against people based on their race. And to enforce this, the US government, the Justice Department, would send agents undercover around to different apartment complexes to make sure that landlords weren't discriminating on who they rented to. This was a routine thing that they were doing, and it eventually happened to the Trump apartments. The DOJ would send in a black person undercover to apply for an apartment, and they quickly started to see a pattern where black or Hispanic people would be told that there was no available units in that complex. And then right after, the DOJ would send in a white person looking for the same type of apartment, only to find that suddenly there was room in that apartment complex. Department of Justice officials did this over and over and started to see a pattern of systematic racial discrimination. And on one day in 1973, Trump and his dad are hit with this lawsuit. The United States of America v. Fred Trump, Donald Trump, and Trump Management, Inc. The DOJ is hitting him with this lawsuit over allegedly discriminating against people based on race or color. They found that managers would mark rental applications with a C, indicating color. But yeah, these are one of these rental applications, and this may be the C that they are referring to here in the remarks section. I don't actually know, I haven't verified that, but in one testimony, a doorman for Trump's property said that he was directed to tell black applicants that the rent was twice as much as it actually was. And then when they asked the super why they denied certain applicants, the super replied that he was, quote, "doing what my boss told me to do. I'm not allowed to rent to black families." The DOJ found that this was widespread, happening all over in Trump's at least 14,000 units. This lawsuit was a pretty huge deal. It was one of the largest fair housing cases at the time. Here's the New York Times front page the day after this came out. Major landlords accused of anti-black bias in city. 27-year-old Donald Trump was furious. But instead of admitting to these allegations and settling with the DOJ, he fought back. And this is where we get to the next item on our list, which is a pattern we'll start to see, which is that when Donald Trump is called out for something, his response is often to fight no matter what.
I think people see me as a fighter. I think people have always seen me as a fighter. They know that I don't take a lot of crap from people.
The Trumps responded by countersuing the Department of Justice for $100 million, claiming that they made false statements. Now, the judge dismissed this suit outright, saying that there was no basis for it. But even still, the Trumps fought on. During this time, Trump said that, quote, "I'd rather fight than fold, because as soon as you fold once, you get the reputation of being a folder." So he kept fighting for years, even though there wasn't really a solid defense there. And finally, he was forced to fold. But watch how he does it. Watch what he prioritizes. He strikes a deal with the DOJ that allows him to admit no wrongdoing, but that would require him to make a bunch of changes, like emphasizing that his apartment complexes are open to people of all races, taking out ads in the paper saying that Trump apartments actually do welcome black renters. But he didn't have to admit any guilt, and that is a point of pride for him.
We settled the suit with no admission of guilt. It was very easy to do.
Fighting no matter what means never admitting you're wrong, regardless of the circumstances, never apologizing, never folding. It's something that all humans do. They evade responsibility, but Trump has kind of made a brand out of it. It's a pattern that we'll see over and over. But anyway, a bigger point I want to make here is that this whole lawsuit really turned Donald Trump off of his dad's business. He didn't like this whole renting to middle and lower income tenants. It was causing too much trouble for him. Remember, he grew up in a rich New York City family with a reputation and connections. He had a taste for prestige and luxury and wealth and attention, and none of that was out here in Queens. So in his early 30s, he starts to turn his attention across the river toward Manhattan, the epicenter of wealth, prestige, excess, and attention, the high life of New York City. And it wouldn't be long before he was at the top of it all.